In the 1920s, association football was drawing massive crowds across the globe, but the sport lacked a true international stage. Its highest level of competition was confined to the Olympic Games, which strictly enforced amateur-only rules. Anyone who played football for a living was barred from entering. FIFA president Jules Rimet recognized that the sport was quickly outgrowing these restrictions. He proposed an alternative, a completely independent World Championship. It would be a standalone tournament open to the absolute best players on Earth, regardless of whether they were professionals or amateurs. In 1928, FIFA officially announced that this new tournament would take place, but the declaration triggered an immediate organizational crisis. They needed a host nation willing to shoulder the massive financial burden of a global event that had never been tested. Several European countries submitted bids, but the rights went to a small South American nation, Uruguay. At the time, the Uruguayan national team was the undisputed king of the sport, having won back-to-back gold medals at the 1924 and 1928 Olympics. They also had a rapidly expanding economy, and their government was eager to host a massive global celebration for the upcoming 1930 centenary of their first constitution. Driven by this national pride and a surplus of capital, Uruguay took a theoretical sporting concept and backed it with hard currency. They were willing to fund the entire experiment. To secure the hosting rights, Uruguay offered a financial guarantee that no other nation could match. They promised to pay for all travel and hotel expenses for every single participating country, and pledged to build a massive, state-of-the-art stadium entirely from scratch. The agreement was struck in late 1929. Almost immediately, the global stock market collapsed, plunging the world into the Great Depression. For European football players, the logistics of attending suddenly became a matter of survival. Traveling to Uruguay required a grueling 3-week-long transatlantic journey by ship. Since most players still held regular day jobs, leaving for 2 months meant they would almost certainly be fired, facing financial ruin back home. By the official deadline of February 28, 1930, the response was definitive. Exactly 0 European countries accepted the invitation. Even England, the birthplace of the sport, refused to participate. Facing the collapse of his vision, Jules Rimet intervened personally. Using his political leverage, he managed to convince just 4 European nations to make the trip: France, Belgium, Romania, and Yugoslavia. Jules Rimet's tournament arrived in Montevideo as a fragile salvage mission, its survival dependent on the few nations that had weathered the economic storm. 3 of those 4 European teams, along with Rimet and the actual trophy, boarded a luxury ocean liner called the SS Conte Verde for the journey to South America. For weeks, these professional athletes were trapped at sea. To maintain their fitness, they conducted physical conditioning and tactical drills on the open, wooden upper deck of the ship as they crossed the Atlantic Ocean. They traveled for 15 days, entirely cut off from the outside world, having no guarantee that the host nation would successfully deliver the tournament awaiting them. Merely reaching the starting line required players to risk their livelihoods on a massive maritime gamble. When they finally docked in Montevideo, the final roster was remarkably small. Only 13 teams participated in total, making 1930 the only World Cup in history played without any qualification rounds. The teams were greeted by a primary venue that was nowhere near finished. A rainy winter had severely delayed the concrete pouring and construction schedule for the Estadio Centenario. Because the primary stadium was a construction site, the opening matches of the first World Cup were relegated to tiny local club fields belonging to teams like Peñarol and Nacional. The organizational friction extended to their own marketing. This breakdown of the official promotional poster shows the tournament dates printed as July 15th to August 15th. In reality, the first matches kicked off on July 13th. The organizers simply never updated the artwork, a mistake that went largely unnoticed for 86 years. 5 days into the tournament, the Estadio Centenario finally opened its gates. Despite the rushed timeline, it stood as the largest football venue outside the British Isles. The competition moved forward despite the unfinished venue and delayed schedules, sustained by the high stakes of the matches themselves. The tournament culminated on July 30th in a high-stakes final between the host nation, Uruguay, and their geographical neighbors, Argentina. It was a bitter rematch of the 1928 Olympic final. The atmosphere was electric and dangerous. An estimated 10,000 to 15,000 Argentine fans crossed the river into Montevideo on a fleet of chartered boats. They arrived at the docks chanting threats, overwhelming the port and flooding into the city. Fearing mass violence, local authorities implemented security measures that are now common. The stadium gates were opened 6 hours before kickoff, so that every single supporter could be searched for weapons before taking their seat. The official tasked with managing this chaos was a Belgian referee named John Langenus. He was so concerned for his own life that he demanded a getaway boat be kept idling at the harbor, ensuring he could flee the country immediately if a riot erupted on the pitch. By the time the players took the field, the escalating nationalist fervor had made the risk of violence as palpable as the competition itself. Before the whistle even blew, the match was halted by a petty dispute. Both Uruguay and Argentina flatly refused to play the final using the opposing team's football. To prevent the situation from deteriorating, FIFA stepped in with an unusual compromise. FIFA officials ruled that Argentina would provide the ball for the first half and Uruguay would use their own for the second. The strategy had an immediate impact. Using their familiar ball, Argentina displayed superior passing ability and dominated the first 45 minutes, taking a 2-1 lead into halftime. But in the second half, the momentum flipped. Utilizing their own slightly heavier ball, Uruguay unleashed a relentless physical attack. They scored 3 unanswered goals, defeating Argentina 4-2 to claim the championship. The aftermath was sharply polarized. The following day was declared a national holiday in Uruguay. Meanwhile, in Buenos Aires, furious mobs threw stones at the Uruguayan consulate. Through economic collapse, transatlantic boycotts, and a construction race, Jules Rimet's vision held together. The 1930 tournament established the foundation for the most watched sporting spectacle in human history.